Best career advice I ever received, I think, was like, show up early, stay late, and be positive. Say yes. When you're early in your career, you need to do a lot of stuff that you maybe not like, but by doing the things you don't like, it gets you closer to doing the things that you love. So, I think every time there's a volunteer for something, say yes. And again, there's just nothing showing up's undefeated. You need to be there early, have a great attitude, have a can-do attitude, and then staying late. Doesn't mean crazy hours, but I mean, you can't beat positively and showing up.
Quick favor before we jump in. It always surprised me that a large percentage of people who listen to the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you're a commercial real estate operator, investor, or builder who values conversations like this around deals, capital, and technology, please take 2 seconds and hit subscribe. It's a simple, free way to support the show. My commitment to you is that my team and I will continue bringing you higher level operators, stronger conversations, and real execution level insights every single week. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. Welcome back to the AI Edge podcast. I'm your host, Louis Fernandes. This show is for builders, operators, and decision makers, the people running real companies, making real decisions, and figuring out how to lead and grow in the changing world. Today's guest is John Crossman, president of Crossman Services, a commercial real estate advisory, brokerage, and investment firm based in Central Florida. John has spent more than 3 decades in commercial real estate industry, building teams, advising clients, and navigating multiple market cycles. Beyond real estate, he's also a speaker, author, and leadership coach, and the host of Crossman Conversation. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with you.
Excellent. John, you've had a really interesting career. You've been an operator, a company builder, a speaker, and a mentor to a lot of people in the industry. Let's start at the beginning. How did you first get into commercial real estate?
Well, for me, I had a unique kind of childhood. My dad was a pastor and civil rights leader. Going back to 1970, my dad was given the nickname the Bridge Builder of the Civil Rights Movement. And about 8 years ago, they named a real bridge after my dad. So you can Google Reverend Ken Crossman Bridge, and it's a bridge for the bridge builders. Growing up in that environment, preachers' kids tend to outperform doctors' kids and lawyers' kids. I think that's because, you grow up in an educated household, you grow up in a kind of a missional, visional household, and you tend to grow up poor. I have this argument with my mom. She says, John, we weren't poor, we lived by faith. And I'm like, I feel like we're kind of poor. I always like to say I tried poverty and I didn't like it. So when I went to college, I really just wanted to major in money. And it's not that like in a materialistic way, but I just, I was raised in an environment that had influence without affluence. And so I felt comfortable engaging kind of different leaders, but wanted to have a job that paid better. What I did not know until 20 years later is I'm very dyslexic. So college, all of education was really hard for me. I respected it. This is really challenging, but real estate clicked with me better than other areas of the industry because it's physical, it's tangible, and I just really liked it. So I just wanted to get into a career where I felt like I could work hard, get compensated for that. And I've always liked job flexibility, and it's still giving me that to this day. I'm still able to do a lot of other things outside of real estate because of the structure of our industry.
Did you always see yourself as a leader and entrepreneur?
No, it's funny that you would say that because first off, entrepreneur is a label that in the last few years, I felt comfortable referring to myself as. It's sort of funny that I think I always was one, but I didn't ever really see myself in that context, but I do now. And I was just telling my wife this. So we had dinner the other night, and we've been married 30 years, and we were having a 30th anniversary dinner. And I said to her, I said, I never had it on my list of goals to be a founder or a CEO or a president. That was never part of it. I was really just early on trying not to get fired. And then I was trying just to do my best, and then things happened. Part of my life changed when I did an RFP for a company that was a Fortune 100 company. And one of their questions they asked was, do you consider yourself to be a leader in the industry? And that's an interesting question because if you say yes, you might look arrogant. Say no, you might look incompetent. It's like, what's the right answer? Well, I had recently finished reading a book, and the book was about leadership, and it said, anyone seeking to influence others is a leader. So a mom's a leader, a coach is a leader, a teacher's a leader. And so I put that definition in my response. By the way, we did win the account, but I put that definition in the response, and I said, by this definition, I'm a leader in the industry because I'm seeking intentionally to influence the industry. Well, what does that mean? Well, we have 12 endowed scholarships at 7 universities, and so we're trying to find resources there. We do a lot of mentoring and speaking, and majority of that for free. And of course, that goes out to in the world of all kinds of people. A very tiny percentage come work for me. Most people are working other places, but we're seeking to influence the industry. We've always been trying to encourage a more educated industry, a more friendly relational industry. So, by that definition, I feel comfortable with the word leader. I said this to somebody the other day, and it seemed obvious to me, and they were surprised I said this. When I come to work, I park my car in the furthest position away from the building. And this person said to me, "Do you do that to get your steps in?" And I said, "No, I do that because you're all more important." I said, when I look at leadership, I see myself wearing an apron, not a crown, which I think I thought was a common expression. She was like, "I never heard that." I'm like, "Yeah, no, I think when you're a leader, you're a servant. And so everyone else becomes more important." My CEO coach was a decorated veteran of the Vietnam War. And he and I were talking about this. And he said, "Yeah, when I was a captain," he goes, "read all the privates, all they listed him ate first, and I ate last." And so that's sort of where that to me. And so again, when I think about defining leadership, it's being last is what a leader is, in my opinion.
What were some of the early lessons that shaped how you operate today?
Well, I would tell you that the Great Recession was one of those moments that was extremely defining. The previous years in the industry before that, I can only remember very vividly having like one sleepless night, like one time a deal was so stressed me out. And when that was gone, it was multiple, multiple, multiple sleepless nights. And I think there was a lot of hardcore rewiring in myself and a lot of people during that time. And I hope we never experience that again. But it fundamentally changed me in many, many ways.
John, when we were preparing this episode, one word that came up about your career was resilience. Real estate is an industry where cycles can be brutal. From your perspective, what does resilience actually look like for a real estate operator?
I went through a rough patch about 3 years ago, and going through it, I watched more than once the TV show Ozark. And if you've seen Ozark, I can identify with Marty Bird. Not that I've been involved in any kind of drug cartel laundering, but I've always lived kind of a clean cut life. And he, aside from that, was a really clean cut guy. And there's a scene there where he's having this fantasy with this woman saying, "You always got the Christmas gifts out. You never miss mortgage payment," kind of a thing. But then he's in a situation where the drug cartel says you have to launder $10 million. And he says it can't be done. And then they say, "Well, we'll kill you and your kids," and not in that order. And I will tell you, as an entrepreneur and as a founder and an owner, I have felt the feelings in that realm, right? Just in the sense of like realizing there's no one coming to rescue. I have to figure this out. And so, in the worst moments, what I've always come back to is, show up and one foot in front of the other. And, one of the expressions I like from my CEO group is to take clarity breaks. And there are times that I go out and just walk around the building, kind of clear my mind, or, I call a friend that's not in the industry just to, chat. But at the end of the day, a lot of business is like being a heavyweight fight. And some rounds you punch, sometimes you receive punches. And in my day, like I'll have a win and a loss during the day. And you just have to come back to really, really balancing yourself and be able to deal with that. Right. And I also, let's say this, Louis, as I get older, I keep redefining success. When you're younger, a lot of your life is defined by adding, like you get to drive, you get to vote, you get to, rent an apartment, you get to lease a car, whatever, like the add. As you get older, life becomes about loss. There's certain things you lose. I ran track in college and I was a sprinter. And it's at a point I can't sprint anymore. You lose that muscle fiber. And, I'm sure someday Michael Jordan can't dunk a basketball, whatever like this happens. You also start to lose the generation in front of you, right? Like there's seasons of life where all your friends are getting married, all your friends have a baby, some of your friends get divorced, like that kind of stuff. You get older and your friends start to become grandparents, but then your friends all start losing their parents, right? And like I was moving my office and I was going through all these files and it was like panels I was on or committees I was on. And I was like, gosh, like 80% of the people around me are not in the industry anymore, right? So that you have to come sort of grips with that, like, oh, wow. And so in some ways, my definition of success keeps evolving. There's some levels I think doing the job is important, but I'll say this real quick. The movie Michael Clayton and with George Clooney, by the way, the Academy Award winning scene in the end, I'd been in that hallway. I've been on that stage right before it, like, I don't know, 30 times. And then the movie Flight with Denzel Washington. Those two movies now are two of the most meaningful movies to me because they're both the story of men, somewhat my age, later in their careers, facing a very strong moral dilemma and then having to decide, do they want to do the right thing and live life harder or do the wrong thing and live life easier, right? And so as I get older, there's just certain things I feel just more emotionally connected to about going down the right path. Because, man, I've seen people pretty messed up finish very well, and I've seen some people who I really admired finish very poorly. And so I get more in my brain about how do I want to finish well.
What's the answer to that? How do you manage that?
To me, it's like part of to me and my mission. I help take care of my mom, and she's in her late 80s. Both my daughters are in college, but they're getting out. They're maybe go to grad school and like helping them. My wife has had a lot of health issues and making sure she's cared for. And so I think there's that. And I think on the work side of it, I define it that I think when I was younger, it was like moving towards the front row. And now I feel like I'm moving towards the balcony. And what I mean by that is, um, I don't get on a board and think, oh, I want to be the chairman. I get on the board and I'll look at a young person and think they should be the chairman, and I'd like to be the consigliere. I'd like to help them get there. And so I cheer for people a lot. If you follow me on LinkedIn, one of the most common things you'll see me saying is way to go. I try to everywhere I can, like it's with integrity. If people I don't like or I don't respect, I don't say way to go. But the ones that I really feel strongly about, I try to voice that. So I try to, as I get older, pull back so other people can get the spotlight and try to do all I can to be supportive of those. I hope what happens to me with my company is that I'm still working at some point, but I'm no longer the leader of the company. I would love that. I would love to raises some people to run the company and still an investor and I can do some deals. That would be a really wonderful success moment. Be then a cheerleader to other leaders. That's my next season of life. I hope.
Amazing, John. What were some of the hardest market cycles that you had to go through?
Well, it's funny. I started in the early 90s through a tough one. The first year I got in the business, my company that I was with, they sent everybody to the Las Vegas ICSC. The next year, they sent everybody but me. And then the next year, they sent Justin to me. They left all the old guys at home. And it was a really big moment in my early career. It still impacts me because what happened? Well, that first time I went, I was the first guy in the booth at the convention, and I refused to leave the booth until everyone else left. And I did not know what I was doing. I just was like, again, I didn't want to. I didn't want to get fired. I want to be the guy that makes things happen. So that next year there was a recession. So the president or the CEO of the company was based in Charlotte. Told the president, he's like, I don't know what that guy's doing, but send Crossman. And I didn't know what I was doing. But I think there was a lot to be said about just showing up early. And that year, I didn't know this till recently because I found this in a file. I got an award. It was at the work the most. My friend Andy Hunt says showing up is undefeated. And so that's a big part of it. It's like showing up and being there. And, I go back, during that Great Recession, after things kind of calmed down and we're trying to figure out what's next in the world, this really happened. Both my nieces were high school age and they texted me and they're like, Uncle John, why aren't you on Facebook? And Lewis, I remember saying, what is Facebook? What is social media? So I had a 22-year-old intern and I said to her, I said, let's just figure this out. Like, let's just start posting stuff. And, it was like the Wild West. It was totally nuts. But we got into a rhythm. And I kid you not, a year later, a Fortune 100 company contacted me and said, we're trying to figure out social media. You seem to know what you're doing. Will you come to our corporate headquarters and train us? And I did, right? So again, it was one of those things where a friend of mine said to me, like, Crossman refuses to participate in recessions. And it's like, well, yeah, I was like, I certainly feel like I'm participating because of the loss. But I think that was just could come back to like, let's just keep working. Let's keep working. And you got to pivot, right? Like you have a mission, you have a business plan, but like if some sort's happening, interest rates go up, and then you pivot and you just keep finding things to work on, right? And so you just got to keep right at it.
John, what separates leaders who survive downturns from those who disappear?
Well, I think that it's what happens before the downturn. So if you were, let's talk about it this way, Lewis. If you said to me, John, at some point there's going to be a downturn, I hope not, sometime there will be. What could you, Lewis, and others listening to this do to prepare for it? Let me give you my advice. Start your day drinking a glass of water. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Go to see your dentist twice a year, get your teeth cleaned. Get your annual physical. If you are not, start and get it every year, having a baseline, your annual physical. Make sure you have a relationship with a therapist. Not that you need to see a therapist per se, but make sure you know one. Okay. Make sure you got a good exercise routine. You don't have to be a triathlete, but make sure you got a good regular exercise routine. Make sure in your life you're making lots of eye contact with people. If you go to a grocery store, don't do self checkout. Check out with the cashier, even if you wait longer, right? And if you every opportunity you can to look people in the eye, do it. And then make sure you have good relationships. Sometimes that can be people you're related to, but sometimes you're related to people, but that doesn't mean they're family. Family can be all kinds of people, but just make sure you're learning that. I had a very serious battle with clinical depression about 10 years ago, and it was the worst hell I've ever experienced in my life. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. The back end of that is that I have incredible empathy for people who are suffering because I experienced it. And, I learned how to build the skill set of learning how to talk about my own feelings and deal with my feelings. So why am I saying those things to you? Because, brother, I have talked to people during the Great Recession. Well, let me back up. During the Great Recession, I knew like within 1 degree of separation, 5 different people in real estate in Florida that took their own lives. I mean, that's the worst thing you ever heard of. Like, you have a history in the Great Depression, people's stockbrokers jumping out buildings. Well, in my market during that time, it really happened. It really did happen. And so that's why I'm telling you, it's when times are good, are you putting gas in the tank and practicing good things so that you're prepared, right? So there's a natural order of life as we lose older people and you learn how to grieve, learning a grieving process. It's also an order of like, how can you handle, things happen? It's like somebody might say, well, if you have enough money buried in the backyard under a mattress, you'd be fine. And it's like, sure, that's part of it. But if you've ever been an employer and you build a company and you have to lay people off, that is a deep, deep emotional moment. And I have known very strong men who've gone through that and said, I'm just never hiring big staff anymore because it was just too hard, too hard. So I think that the answer to that is like, how do people who got through it? It's because they were girded better in their totality. And look, if you are going through something like that, and you're driving to work and you're in your car and you have a panic attack, that's why I'm like, go see your doctor. And by the way, if you do that, you go see your doctor and your doctor says, well, we're going to put you on Klonopin and Zoloft. I'm like, okay, do that and see a therapist and have friends and eat healthy. And at some point, it's no shame if you don't, but at some point you probably could get off those meds. Be very careful doing that. But then make sure you're doing all the things to kind of keep it going, right? And you may be having an anxiety or panic attack because there's something you're not dealing with, and you have to learn how to deal with it. You have to learn how to have hard conversations or speak your truth. Or, I was recently thinking about stuff that gives me anxiety. And so I told some of my coworkers about it. So I had this thing that's really bothered me. And by the way, Louis, it's not a big deal, just my own personal, how I'm wired, not that it's anything big. But once I said it out loud, I felt better. And so it's just learning to be in those spaces. And think working on the mental health side up front is what can help us be prepared to the bad things that will come at some point for sure.
I think that's amazing advice. John, how do you relate to somebody if you've never gone through it yourself? For example, I really don't have much stress or anxiety, but yet I have coworkers, friends who have mental health issues. You talked about empathy. How are you able to empathize if you haven't gone through it yourself?
Well, I think what it starts with is having curiosity.
Hmm.
My dad used to say the difference between a good salesperson and a great salesperson is a great salesperson's stories are true. And so I think if you start with your ability to just speak your truth about your own life experience, that's helpful. Tell your own stories. And then the other side, it's a level of genuine interest and curiosity. I mean, you are clearly a curious person who seems to very sincerely, genuinely be interested in other people. Listen, I lost a good friend to suicide. And so this behind me is a piece of artwork that's about suicide, and it says hope, love, heal. And it's about I do a lot of work to prevent suicide. And a friend of mine said to me, he looked at me, he goes, John, I just don't get that. And I looked at him, I said, I'm so glad you don't. I hope you never do.
Right?
Right? I don't want you to know. I hope you never, I hope, Lewis, I hope your whole life you never know. When you're asking the question, though, I think that I hope you never experience it and that you need empathy or you have it. What I would say to you is like, be curious. And then it's where just like ask somebody a question and just listen. And, a lot of times in life, what people need is they need to be heard, right? They just need to be heard. And then they need to be understood. Seen people are healthy people. When you look at situations in society where there are riots, riots are kind of the greatest example of people feeling unheard or unseen. And I think that through the DEI kind of woke movement we went through, part of the problem with it is like some of the stuff needed to get talked about, said, and in other ways it was like overstated. And when it got overstated, other people were told not to speak, right? And so here's a thought: don't marginalize anybody. Don't marginalize anybody. And if people are being marginalized and told you cannot have an opinion, you can't speak, what are we doing, guys? That's not going to end up well. It's not going to end up well. But on the flip side, if we're in a headspace of, Lewis, what do you think? Tell me your story. You don't have to agree with people. You don't have to agree with them. But if you just listen to them, one of the most important things in life is the ability to really understand another person's perspective. I'll give you an example on a controversial topic, but I promise, Lewis, this won't be that bad. If you and I had a friend who had an apartment in Midtown Manhattan, and they said to us, "Oh my gosh, our neighbor has a 357 gun. I'm really nervous about that." You and I could both say, "Well, I'm not living there, but I can see that because that gun, if it went up accidentally, could shoot through a wall. And if you're in an apartment, that's very dangerous." But maybe the next day, you and I have a friend who lives in Wyoming, and they live on a 10-acre piece of land, and they said, "Oh my gosh, occasionally I see rattlesnakes, so I keep a shotgun." Because I have small children. I'm about it. So you could live in a headspace where you're like, oh, that person's perspective on guns makes sense, and that person's perspective makes sense, and they're not in conflict with one another, right? It's the ability to have like go, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, right? And so a lot of times what happens in life becomes these polarizing, crazy issues that are the exact opposite of fighting. But I think in business and entrepreneurs, we don't live in that headspace, right? We have customers, we have partners, we hear stories, and we allow for flexibility and perspectives. That's what makes us good at our jobs, I think.
Amazing, John. You've talked about the importance of disciplined decision making, especially when markets feel uncertain. In real estate today, there's a lot of noise, interest rate, capital markets, shifting demand. How do you stay disciplined as a leader when everyone around you may be reacting emotionally?
Well, I really believe in having a lot of advisors, and I tend to have a strong sense of agency. Like I feel confident, like when I lean in on a lot of stuff and I'm passionate about it, I can move strongly. And I feel like that's a strength. Sometimes it can be off-putting other people, and so I try to pull it back and be measured with it. On the other hand, I have always really tried to desire to be coachable. I want to be coachable. So I'm in a CEO group. I love my CEO group, and I have a CEO coach, right? And so I, submit to them. I have a leadership team for my company, and while I'm the boss, when I have those meetings, I've worked really hard to really try to establish trust that they feel empowered to say whatever they need to say, including being, critical of me, right? Like having that environment. And then I have other kind of good advisors and counselors. So what I try to say is I check myself before I wreck myself. Is that how they say it? I guess. But it's really trying to have a lot of good advisors so that you have healthy perspectives. I've also, Lewis, a lot of times in different years, I've kind of thought about what's a word for the year or something I really need to hear. Really, anxiety can be your friend, right? Anxiety, if it's toxic, it's bad, and you need to work on that. But if you're just getting anxiety in general, it can be your friend. I loved an interview with Bill Hader, who was a comedian on Saturday Night Live, and he talked about somebody taught him that as a comedian performer, anxiety was his friend. Like you got your friend with you, it's making you be alive and be focused, right? And so to me, I was really trying to be aware of what's going on. So a couple of years ago, it really hit me was focus. I had too much going on, and I had to get much more discipline in my mind of like, what are the top things I could get done every day, and letting some other things just fall apart. They need to get the top, like focus, right? Focus. So when I came into this year, a big word for me has been is accountability. Like, what am I accountable for versus what are my other teammates accountable for? My CEO group always says it's not an org chart, it's an accountability chart. Who is accountable for things? And so again, it's trying to onboard what's in my season of life, what's the thing I need to pull in. Maybe this way, it's like visualize a bunch of categories, 10 categories where a really optimal person is getting a 10 in each one. I think in some areas of my life, there's a category where I'm actually like at a 57, and the next category I'm at a 2, And, sometimes I need to go, wow, that 57 could drop to 35, but maybe I need to get that 2 to a 4, right? Or maybe that 2, I'm really bad at that, but I need to hire at 10 and then empower that 10 to do stuff, right? So that's that balance. And I've done a lot of work, on myself. I've done a lot of recovery work. Those tools have really helped me. I hired a consultant named Lee Heck Harris. They did a whole big profile on me. I took a season of life and they gave me a lot of feedback for myself. So I think being very self-reflective and intentional in coaching, people will tell you, they'll say, oh yeah, no, I want to be coached. But then if you tell them something, you've got to really be ready to take that punch to the face that you may think you're great at something, it turns out you're terrible at it, I mean, but there's a beauty to that too, right? If sometimes there can be a release, like if all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, I'm not good at that," and then maybe again, a teammate can do that, not you. Know, you got to think about sometimes what's motivating you, and fear can be a healthy motivator or it could be a toxic motivator, right? Fear protects us, which is a good thing. But if you're making all your decisions fear-based, I'll tell you a crazy story, Lewis. There's a guy in the industry that I did not like. I mean, every time I was around, him, "Oh, I can't stand this guy," and so I just didn't like him. He rubbed me the wrong way, and I can tell you stories that I am the villain in the story because I didn't like this guy. So I was with a group of people on a Zoom call, and he said he wanted to say something, and honestly, Lewis, I was like, "Oh, jeez." So the Zoom camera goes to him, and he looks at the camera and he says, "I'm dying." That's what he said. And he said, "I think I got the illness I got because I took so many things on, I wasn't vulnerable, I didn't ask for help, and I think the pressure got me. I'm not going to make it." He goes, "I need you to hear this story so you don't make the same mistake." And honest to goodness, he passed like within 3 months. And that
Wow.
guy, after all these years of me not liking him, I think so highly of him because he finished well and he gave me a gift. Like, all the time he was irritating me, he was irritated, with himself, he was irritated, but he gave me a gift of vulnerability that I can say, "Oh, wow, I don't have to be this guy. I can be, vulnerable, and I can be open and transparent, and that's okay." And he gave me and everybody in that room that gift, which was pretty awesome.
Incredible. How do great operators evaluate risk?
Well, yeah, it's funny you should say that. I take a ton of calculated risk. I always tell college students this. I'm like, look, my life has been defined by taking a ton of calculated risk. Now, listen, don't let your girlfriend cut your hair. That's a bad risk. Don't take that risk, right? And so to me, it's like I'm about taking a lot of calculated risk. My business partner teases me because he says that I'm ready, fire. And he's like, ready, aim, 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 aim. And, but that's why I think we're good partners, right? And I think knowing that about myself and then having a partner that can help balance me out is really good, right? And sometimes he needs to move a little quicker. I need to move a little slower. I am conservative. I do, when I look at a deal, I just recently bought a shopping center and I liked it. I had a couple of people on my team didn't like it, but then we more worked on it. We kind of put some things out, it cleared some hurdles, and now I think it's going to do fantastic. But I'm grateful for the people on my team that kind of didn't like it because it made us really look at it more in a conservative way, and I think we got there. So I think the answer is like I like calculated risk. I like trying things. It's important to have lots of counsel and get other people's opinion and really, really listen.
And what mistakes do you see younger investors making right now?
Oh, they're funny. I think on one hand, I've seen some make some terrible risk that I would never do, whether it's doing really high personal guarantees that I'm like, I don't know how they sleep at night, or doing a ton of syndication without really having their being organized. And I've seen horror stories of losing properties. So I think that is really bad. And I've seen that. On the other hand, I see a lot of people don't take enough risk, like meaning like they don't reach out to people, don't follow up, they don't ask, they don't make as many human connections as I think they should. It's funny, the younger generation, the first generation that came up through social media had to get the speech, be careful what you post. They needed to hear that, right? But what happened is the years after that, most of these kids, they like post nothing. They don't take any risk with social media. That's the backlash. My younger daughter, she's 20, was in a college class, and the professor said, "You don't need to get on LinkedIn until you're 25." And I'm like, "Your professor's wrong. Like, you need to be on LinkedIn now and building out your LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn all the time." So I think some of them have to learn how to take those kind of human risk, It's social media human risk and try some things. So there's the investor risk, like again, there's some stuff that's it's crazy, like be careful. But there's a human risk of you hear these things about kids that young men have never asked a girl on a date. And I'm like, what, dude? Yeah, like sometimes in life you got to put yourself out there and you may get shot down. But that's part of like, how you get self-esteem? You do self-esteemable things,
That's it.
right? I mean, you do self-esteemable things. And I've tried some crazy stuff and I still try crazy stuff and I fail. And sometimes I try stuff and I can tell the other person's like, oh, but I'm like, okay, well, roll on, keep doing something else. But I always think about Hamilton, the musical, and the room where it happened. And I always think the young people, if like, there's always a higher room. By the way, you think you're at the top. There's always a higher room. You're like, wait, what? Like, there's somebody up the chain. And if you want to get in the room where it happened, you're going to have to take some risk. You have to lean in, and you'll be shocked how much it keeps going up.
John, let's talk a little bit about how you take risks, signals that you look for before making major decisions.
To me, it's like when it comes to deals, there's certain key things I look at. I'm trying to double the value of a property in 5 to 7 years. And so I look at the price per square foot. I look at the rent growth in the area. There's keys to different markets you're betting on, and how much do you feel like the property can get there. So there's a lot of key things I look at. I'm like, I'm not saying it's bad property. I'm just saying it's a bet I wouldn't make. Path of progress and growth. I bought a shopping center that's like right behind Disney. And I remember saying, the bet on this is you bet on Disney or you're not. I'll bet on Disney, right? Like all day long. Oh, this is my kind of place. And so, doing 10 interviews. I remember doing 10 interviews on that property, and every single tenant told me they like to expand. That's been signed, right? So there's certain things that are a tell. Sometimes there's a tell by who owns the property. I bought a property one time, and the current leasing company, terrible, and the ownership was offsite, and I had some back, terrible. We got the property under contract. There was a credit tenant, lease coming up in 18 months, no options, and they were paying at 80% below market. So when we got in, we renewed that tenant on a 10-year lease. It created $1 million in value just on that deal. So, again, it was a property that a lot of people I think would look at and go, oh, it had some little problems here and there. But when you look under the hood, you're like, that right there, that is an opportunity. That's a play, you know? It was funny. This one time I bought a shopping center, and there was a gym in the center paying $7.75 square foot, $7.75 square foot. There was another gym not too far away, it's the same relative area town, paying $38 a square foot. And I was giving a speech to a group, and I was telling that story, and I said I bought the one at 775. And this woman in the front row was like, "What? Why do they want paying 38?" She couldn't get it. I was like, "Because I can raise the rent on a 775 tenant. You can't raise the rent on a tenant paying 38. It's going to go down. That's a bad bet, right?" So, look, it's intentional, right? It's thoughtful. It's like there's all kind of reasons and tells, and I don't get it always right? And sometimes you don't know. I certainly look at some deals that I kind of like, and I'm like, I don't know exactly what it is, but I don't move forward on buying something until I see a path. I have to see a path of like, I know how to take this thing from here to here. I can see how it's going to go. And I really have to run through a whole process to figure that out. I'll tell you a funny one. I looked at a property on a weekend early in the morning, and I was driving around the back because it's important to know, can the trucks access the retailer in the back? So I'm around the back of the property. Lewis, there's 3 deputies, cars, all parked together. And so I rolled up and I was like, "Good morning, officers." Hello. And I just said, I said, "I'm looking to find this property." And they were like, "Well, we're here." I mean, that's where they're doing their paperwork, right? So that's a tell. It doesn't mean, hey, don't buy that property. But if law enforcement is on your property so much, it's where they do their paperwork. That's something you got to think about.
Excellent. Let's talk about the current market, John. A lot of people say commercial real estate is going through a major transition period. From your vantage point in Central Florida and nationally, what do you see happening in the market right now?
Well, if I'm speaking about my area in retail, doing kind of great, right? I will tell you, Louis, I've been in this business 33 years, and I've been told that my business is going to go away for the entire time, right? And so in the 90s, people would tell me like, "Oh, you're going to lose your job because Walmart's going to put everybody out of business." Okay. And then it was, the ramping up of like the internet stuff. And then it was Amazon, and Amazon's going to put you all out of business. And then it was COVID, right? Like, the retail apocalypse and then COVID. Well, what happened during that time is there was a real lapse of construction done. And now in so many markets, everything's 100% leased, right? And so now retail is really in favor. Of course, for me, it was always in favor. It was always good to me. So I always think that's you got to pivot, right? But here's the thing, man. We talk about you were talking earlier about mental health. People were built to be in relationship, right? We are pack animals like dogs. That's why dogs are a great pet because they want to be in a relationship. They want to be with you. You can't leave it by itself. It's got to be around you. Like I have a Great Dane, and when I'm in the house, wherever I go in the house, that dog is like on my hip because she wants to be with me, and when my wife's home, she's with her. Right? That's how they are. That's how we are. If you have young children, you know that you got to get those kids out of the house or they'll destroy your home, right? You got a couple of 4-year-olds in your house, you better get them out. So to me, it's like when we have great retailers, they're relevant to their communities. In Florida, in the Southeast U.S., the best grocer is Publix. And one of the stories I always tell is that when my daughters were like 4 and 5, I was taken to do some fun stuff on Saturday, and I called my wife. I'm like, "What do I do if they need to use the restroom?" She said, "Go to Publix." I was like, "Really?" And she's like, "John, like Publix has the best restrooms." And as I started understanding that, is like you walk in a grocery store and they're great bathrooms, they're clean and they're safe, right? So for women, small children, safe. Publix, the third word my daughter said first was dada, then mama, and then balloon because every time she go to Publix, she got a free balloon. And Publix has a thing where, if you're a kid, you get a free cookie. Now they have free cookie, free banana. And
Nice.
so, that's a retailer that's, it's relevant, right? And then Florida, like, if you've got young kids and it's raining out, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Maybe put your kid in the buggy and just go around Publix, give them a cookie, and you can do that. So I think to me, it's like great retailers are relevant to community. So I'm bullish on retail. I feel good about retail, right? I feel it's in a good spot, right? And I think there's all kinds of areas there's market corrections. But look, if you're an expert, if you're an advisor, that people need you. Like, listen, if you're selling houses and the market's hot, you just show up to work or close out. That's one thing. It's another thing where you're trying to do stuff to help people solve problems. We're doing a consulting job right now. We're writing a report that's talking about how you can convert some spaces that are non apartments into apartments. We're doing a big study about that. But that's another example. Like, look, somebody's going to come out and say, "Hey, I figured it out how to like in a financial return way convert an office building to apartments, right? Or convert something else that's not used into affordable housing, right? I mean, it is when pressure happens, like a lot of greatness comes out of that. So to me, it's like any area of the industry you're feeling this pain point, like, man, let that pain be a teacher and turn it into something interesting.
Where are the real opportunities today, John?
I think there's some middle market opportunities that I think people may not be thinking about. And what I mean by that is like, typically when we think about real estate, we think about tier one markets. We talk about in Miami or LA or Atlanta or Chicago. But I think there's a markets all across the country, whether it's an Indianapolis or it's a Birmingham or it's a Topeka or a San Antonio. I think that, maybe instead of some companies thinking that like, it's about the top 10, I'm like, it may be about the top 75, right? That you can start looking around America at places that maybe typically haven't investors haven't looked at that are really solid. My wife's from Jackson, this area, and Northeast Jackson, actually the east side, and the total Brandon and all those different areas in Mississippi. Oh my gosh, are great places to invest. And but Nashville, there's areas in Memphis. You and I could keep going on and on. There's places that are like, oh yeah, like Charlotte or Columbia, South Carolina. I could keep going where you're like, well, that is a cool place, right? I think in Florida, it's a weird thing is like if you start on Jacksonville and you go all the way down our coast, all the way around to the Panhandle, that coastline is longer than the rest of the coast of the East Coast of the United States. Isn't that crazy? And
Incredible.
so it sort of makes you rethink, like, oh wow, maybe there's more coastal opportunities in Florida than we're thinking about. Because maybe traditionally we're thinking Tampa, Miami, and Jacksonville. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, the best downtown I've been to in a long time is downtown West Palm Beach. I mean, Louis, if you and I want to get a bunch of friends and move to downtown West Palm, we're going to have a good time. Like they got it going on in downtown West Palm. 30 plus years ago when I lived down there, it was one of the dangerous, scariest places I've ever been. And now you see ladies walking with their little tiny dog. It's awesome. And right there on the water and it's gorgeous. So yeah, no, I think that's the interesting thing to me. I think there's markets that are typically people were not excited about. I think they probably could be more excited about today.
John, where are the risks that people are underestimating right now?
That's a good question. Risks that they're underestimating right now. Um, let me, I'm going to not answer that. I'm going to try to answer it. I tend to think a lot of times people are maybe too catastrophic and miss sort of key opportunities. Now, let me look back that up. I think when things are hot, they don't just take into the kind of risk that they're not going to be going that great. I have seen deals sell where it's like a 5 cap at 1,000 square foot, any number of things where I'm like, dude, that seems to be baking in that nothing is ever going to go wrong ever. And when I see those kinds of deals, I'm like, that's nuts. But then, the shopping center I just bought it for $53 a square foot, And so to me, it's like even if things went really bad, I'm in a pretty great place. I think I'm gonna do really well in that center, but if things went bad, 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 it's hard that I'm gonna get messed up on that deal. So I think on the risk side, the way people aren't thinking about is probably underestimating where things go bad. And I think the other side, they're overestimating when things would go bad. And I would say try to value out of that kind of in the middle. A lot of capital there tends to be kind of a herd mentality, which you don't want to completely yin when others yang, but don't totally listen to all the people, all the noise.
One of the things that stands out about your work is how much you focus on people and leadership, not just transactions. Why is culture and leadership so important in real estate organization?
Well, because real estate's local, right? Like it's about what's happening in a local market. And if you don't understand local markets, you're not going to understand real estate. I'm sure if I came and saw you and you came and saw me, at some point would be like, huh, that's a localism that other parts of the country don't always, are part of. And we get come with all kinds of different examples how local cultures view things or value things or um how they talk to each other, and that can break down all kinds of different ways. One of my favorite ones is in the South is when Southern women say, "Well, bless her heart," and of course that's a nice way of saying she's an idiot, right? Like, and so but again, different way people talk and how they communicate, what's a compliment versus insult. So you have to have local market knowledge, right? And I've always taught my daughters that wherever you go, anywhere in the world, if you really focus on respecting the local culture, you're going to do fine. Like you respect that. Hey, this is their rules. If you're in Tokyo versus being in, someplace in Berlin or something like that, like what are their local customs and understanding and respecting how they do things, right? So that's my answer to that is real estate's local and you gotta really, really understand that to be successful. There are companies that are crazy successful in Miami and they never leave Miami. And then sometimes when they do leave Miami, it doesn't go well because they can be kind of an aggressive, like we're Miami and sometimes people in Miami, they look at the rest of the state as Southern Alabama and they just don't respect it. Well, that doesn't go well. You're not going to roll into Jacksonville and that's not going to go well. But in the reverse, if I go rolling in Miami and not respecting the vastness of an international city that it is, which it is amazing, that's not going to go well for me. So you got to keep coming back and knowing who you are and then knowing how you dock and connect to other cultures.
I agree. I always tell people I'm not in the real estate business. I'm actually in the relationship business.
Well, let's talk about that real quick, because when you say that, what jumps to my mind is some people, not you, Lewis, but some people say that, and what they really mean is they are in the transactional business, right? There are a lot of people that the only way they look at things is what can they get out of it. You're not that guy because you're having me on your podcast, and that to me, that's a tell right then and there that you, by doing this podcast, you're giving other people, you're giving me a platform. Like I'm receiving something from you, and I take that very seriously. Like that's why I'm going to promote this and do what I can to support you because you blessed me and I want to bless you. It's like, but there's a lot of people, some people, or some people are sociopaths or narcissists or self-entitled. And so they just see the world as like, oh, well, you're doing the mean. Well, of course you are. They think so very highly of themselves. Right. So I think that's important that it's important to think about how words have meaning, words matter. And so what I always tell college students and young professionals, like if someone's helping you in a relationship, you need to give back. Right. Like, and if you're not, like, what is that dynamic? It's just like, you would never show up on Christmas morning and not have gifts for anybody and just open all kinds of presents. That would be weird. Or if somebody gives you a Christmas gift and you like never give a Christmas gift back, or I mean a birthday present back, or whatever you're at, that's not going to go well. And so I think it goes into business, like it's being mindful and you can't always keep track of everything. but I want to have a spirit and ethos that's in a giving space, right? And so that I want to stay in balance. And when listen, people that bring me business or try to help me, I take that very seriously because they're blessing me. I want to make sure I'm blessing them. And I totally believe that about you. I just want to make sure people are listening that it's so easy to say, yeah, but in relationships. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Do you believe in charity? Like you're getting stuff and not giving back? Or do you really believe in a balance? It's about it's really one of the most important lessons that I think college students have to learn because when you're a child and then over in college, your parents give, professors give. That is not the real world. That is not the real world. And I tell kids like start sending thank you notes to your professors, start sending thank you notes to your parents because you need to stay balanced.
Love it. What makes a great team in commercial real estate?
So I ran track in college, and I love track. Track is an individual sport, and it's a team sport, right? It's both. When you're coaching a track team, you have to learn that it's not an issue of being interdependent. You know, like you can't be a great running back if the offensive line is terrible. You can't be a great center if the point guards can't shoot. You know, right? I don't know anything about hockey. Whatever the example is in hockey, apply that there, right? I'm trying to be geographically respectful, you know. But in track, like if you're really great at the hurdles and someone does the long jump and you hit the hurdle and they break the world record, but I think if you're a great coach, you teach to have an environment where they cheer for each other. You promote that and teach it relationally. So I think in real estate, particularly in real estate companies, some aspects of the companies can be interrelated. But even when they're interrelated, like leasing and property management, their goals aren't always instinctively aligned. Like there's the old kind of joke about how like when a company picks up a new leasing assignment, the lease agents cheer and the property managers cry, right? Because the lease agents make more money, others may not make any more money, and they just have more work to do. They go work more hours and don't make any more money. Like that's a real tension dynamic. And there are some companies I've talked to people where like the property managers hate the lease agents and the county people hate the property managers and the maintenance people hate. I've seen that happen where you're like, Lord. So again, you have to realize as a coach, as a leader, you're not coaching a football team where they have to be dependent on each other. You're coaching a track team, which you're trying to encourage people to cheer for one another. And then you got to really work on that. And that can be cultural, just like how you do things, acknowledgement, seeing people. But it also could be financial and finding ways to financially motivate people to do the morally right thing.
You talked about college kids. How do you develop young talent in the industry?
Well, one of the big things I like to promote is getting degrees in real estate. I have a college degree in real estate. Back then, people were always shocked about a degree in real estate, but there's a lot of great real estate programs out there today. There's a ton of them. There's like 50 great programs across the country and in Canada. And so I always encourage people like check out those great real estate programs. And even if you graduate the university, weren't part of the real estate program, you can get networked in. So I think from an academic standpoint. And then secondly, if then you're entering the industry, get your professional designation. I'm a huge fan of the CSAM. I have a bachelor's in real estate and a CSAM, and there's a lot of equivalency to that. So I think being a professional and taking education very seriously. And also on that point, I'm a big supporter of historically Black colleges and universities. HBCUs were created at the end of the Civil War and have played an important part in U.S. history. And when I first got involved, there were basically none. There's 100 of them. Basically none of them were teaching real estate. And so I've really been a part of like endowment scholarships at HBCUs and encouraging them to teach real estate. And when we look at the issue of the average white family and average Black family in America having a wealth gap, the biggest part of that gap is real estate ownership. And so to get at a collegiate level, and even if we're talking about like, make sure you read your apartment lease before you sign it, right? That's a big one. But also making sure that, we're promoting building equity and even home ownership. So I really think it's that educational atmosphere that I think is really critical.
What leadership mistakes do you see executives making, John?
I think that one of the biggest mistakes I see is, it's a lack of empathy, a lack of sympathy, a lack of curiosity. It can be so focused on the deals, not seeing the people, right? And so there are a lot of leaders out there are great deal people. They know how to make money, and I applaud that. That's a great thing. Of course, devout capitalist, love it. But sometimes in that zest they don't always acknowledge people on the way. And so I think really trying to slow down and make sure you're understanding what your staff needs. Again, people being seen and being appreciated. I think that whether it's the security guard or the cleaning person or a receptionist or wherever you are on the org chart, treat people the right way. Kim Loptrop's old friend of mine, he was the CEO of Red Lobster. And I was asking about this one time, and he said, if you want to be a CEO, he's like, you really got to treat it like you're running for office. You think about a politician that's, shaking hands with leaders and they're shaking hands with, mom and pops. He's like, great CEOs like live in that headspace. And I was like, that's cool. I like that. So I think having that mindset is really very powerful as opposed to being, just a one channel. There are some people, and you can hear how they talk, they only define success by deal volume. Like that's the only way they define it. But I'll tell you the irony is, Lewis, like the people I know who are the real successful ones, I mean financially, like real successful, they see everybody. They're more rounded. Some real estate people are really one trick ponies. It's kind of weird. They just know how to do deals, but they've never run a P&L. They've never hired somebody. They've never trained somebody. They don't really understand how the business works. Honestly, at my age, I see some of them really suffer with sort of career depression because they get burnt out and they may have the fanciest title you've ever heard of, but they don't feel appreciated because they didn't cultivate any additional skills. If you're listening to this podcast and you work for a big company, one of the things I would tell you is like get all the training you can. If your company has HR classes, take them. If they have management classes, take them. I would look at yourself. It's like there's real estate knowledge, there's your specialty knowledge, like if you're in multifamily or hospitality or whatever. Really learning that, really learning real estate, and then really learning sales, right? And then if you're like, well, I got all that. Well, I'm like, well, do you understand HR? Of course, HR. Do you understand legal? Do you understand finance, like the running the business? It's ridiculous how many brokers I'm like, you not understand how this works, like as far as understanding, budgets and things like that. I take dollars spent by the company very seriously, and that's really helped me. But you have some people that, dude, if they have a company credit card, they're, we had a dinner years ago. We would do these dinners for different key people. And I'll never forget this. This guy couldn't come. He sent his analyst. And I don't drink. I know much about drinking, but I know this. The kid was like 23 years old. He kept ordering Johnny Walker Blue. I mean, he was just, oh, it's your company credit card, zip, zip, zip. And like no respect for that guy at all. It's like just not a level of maturity in seeing the greater, bigger picture.
John, every operator eventually hits the point where the business grows faster than the systems. We're going to talk a little bit about systems now. When deals or clients start stacking up, what's the first thing that tends to break operationally?
So first thing is break operationally. I would say probably people, right? Like I think you can definitely have, you may not see it coming, but you have kind of a riot on your hands where sometimes your best people, they say yes to everything. You walk in their office and say, hey, can you get this done? They're like, yes, can this, yes, yes, yes. And maybe they don't feel power and say no. Maybe they're scared to say no. And then all of a sudden you have something come up really sideways. I have been in meetings where I've seen a really top performer all of a sudden like get very emotional and say something inappropriate. And like, oh, what the heck was that all about? And then you come to find out they're working way too many hours and they were overloaded and finally it was the last straw that. So I think that's typically when I've seen it, in that kind of stuff. You always can see it just in the mistakes, like where you're like, wait, why did that happen? And when people are tired, they can make mistakes. We went to Las Vegas for an ICSC convention years ago, and a very good marketing person, she paid something like $3,000 to ship the water back that wasn't used in our booth. And there was probably like $37 worth of water or something like, you could have just poured it on the desert, my friend. And I remember her crying about it and just consoling her, being like, look, it's okay. We made mistakes. But she was tired. She was overworked and she was moving fast and just made a dumb mistake. But that system did break. And I got a multitude of stories I can tell you about that kind of stuff happening. It certainly could be somebody could be apathetic or even egregious, but I think most of the time that's coming from somebody being overworked, not communicating, and then something really breaks.
Love it, John. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about AI.
Mm-hmm.
This will be fun. Our show is called the AI Edge Podcast, so we always like to ask our leaders how they think about technology. So, from your perspective, where do you see technology or AI having the biggest impact in commercial real estate?
So I'm going to answer, not answer. That's like a politician does. But let me say this, because I think this is really, really important. I think we need to completely respect AI and technology and equally, not less than, not greater than, non-AI. Okay. And then marry those two. Right. And so what does that mean? That means like use AI every chance you get to do so many things and write handwritten notes. right? You guys use AI every chance you get and ask that young lady on a date, not at work, but you guys use AI all you can. And if a coworker is in the hospital, visit them. You use AI all you can. If a coworker has a death in the family, go to the funeral, right? So my point being is like always, always, always leverage technology fully and don't lose and forget to do the human things too. Like do both, right? And obviously I use AI in different forms of passion a lot, almost every day in some form of fashion and awesome. But I asked a broker, we're looking at a property. And it was not a big deal. It's probably a $6 million deal. But I asked him about something going on across the street. And by the way, this is the tell. When I talked to the broker, he kept mispronouncing the name of the city. Like that's a tell. Like he doesn't really know. But I asked him about something going across the street, and he sent me this email with all this stuff, and it was clearly AI. It was clearly he went into AI and he asked a question, he just cut and pasted it. It made him look like an idiot. That's not a good use of AI, right? That's not the intention. Like it should be making your business faster and smoother and more efficient. It should be making looking better. You know what I love? This is not AI, but I love it so much. It was like almost every day. So I'll be in a meeting and somebody comes up in a Zoom meeting, somebody referencing somebody, and I go right on LinkedIn and I look them up. And I have over 34,000 followers on LinkedIn, so I have a lot of people I'm connected to. But with that many, I also am like 1 degree from somebody. And somebody's like, "Oh, do you know so and so?" And I'm like, "Oh, let me see." And I'm like, "Oh, I do. I see. I exchanged a message with them 2 years ago." Or I don't, but it looks like they went to Duke University. Wow, it's a great school. And they're like, "Oh, that's cool, right?" So, but the same can be true with AI, whereas like if you're on top of it, you're looking things up, like you clearly have done some really good research on me, and I received that as a sign of respect. Like I received that, well, like, oh, wow, you cared enough to research me, and that it makes me feel good. I feel honored by that. And you're personally asking the questions in a human way, and you're asking follow-up questions that you're actually listening, and there's a tenet to it. So that's my big thing is like just it's making sure you're balanced. It's making sure you're balanced. You can't honestly, Lewis, in my core soul, I'm an introverted person, and people are surprised when they hear that. But the sign of it is, when I'm a weekend, while my family's out of town, I just almost don't leave the house. I just sort of like being by myself, right? But if you see me at a real estate event, you're like, gosh, that guy's networking like crazy. And it's because that's my job, right? So I can learn it. But I get worried about somebody who is not doing the things they need to do because they're trying to have AI do it for them. And that's not the intent. So the balance is the key. I don't know if I answered your question, but I wanted to say that if that's helpful.
No, that's great. I'll give you a couple of prompts. How about operations? Do you see AI working in the operations in commercial?
Absolutely. If you talk to every member of my team, whether they're in leasing or accounting or property management, really anywhere through the system, they're using some level of AI in some sense or form. So it's all the way throughout the system, right? So absolutely it's used everywhere. You just need to like know what your mission and you're using that tool, right? If you're like, hey, I'm going to clear this land, I need a sickle, and now I need to pull up some of these little things, I need a hoe, right? Like you're using the right tools to deal with it, right? You don't start the project and look at the tool. You start the project with what am I trying to do, and then you bring in the right tools to it. Like I need a hammer, I need a wrench, right? So I need AI for this function in this area.
Do you see it helpful in deal analysis?
I think yes, but when I hear that in my own head, it's like I have an analyst who feel very strongly about. He is a super I feel very strongly about. We use Argus to run our deals. I feel strongly about. So I think it does come in some points, but that's another one, man. Like if you're evaluating a deal and you're trying to look at the 5-year IRR, I really want to dive into that very closely and say, what are we saying that tenant's going to renew it? How long we think it's going to be down? I was in a meeting today where we were talking about construction costs. Like numbers can change and really dialing in on budgets, that's a big deal. So again, I think there's probably some level using AI in there, but I would not trust any of that until you're like really personally focused on that. I mentioned my dad earlier and my dad's career, and I was looking him up recently on ChatGPT and all this cool stuff came on it, but it kept referring to my mom, his wife, as his daughter. And that was just so funny to me, like it was just wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah,
So,
it's not always right.
and he's not always right. But that's why you gotta do your homework. If it's augmenting, you're gonna do great, you know?
Absolutely. How about tenant relationships?
Well, I think that if you're using it right and you're doing research, you can make them more intimate, right, and more place of connection with people. I like to be a fan of my tenants and cheering them on and being supportive of them. And again, if you're researching, that can be helpful. I just keep coming back to the human component. When I go to my properties, I never tell people there that I'm the landlord. This property I just bought, I've had 3 meals there, and every time I've gone and the 2 times I went to mom and pops, and I had a really good time with the server, and I tipped well because I just wanna, be well, but again, they don't know who I am, and then I've gone on social media and checked in at that restaurant, said, "Oh, this place is great," right? And I'm just trying to honor and help that small business. And
Beautiful.
so again, like, part of the research, knowing who you're talking to and that connection point, that's really key.
How about data and decision making? Do you see AI being helpful in that?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I am a big research guy. That's kind of my background in the industry where I came from originally when I started. But again, knowing everything you can about a market and a sub-market, what's happening, where it's going, that's all pretty important. It's a big deal.
Amazing. John, let's land this plane. We're going to do a little lightning round, some
Boy.
quick hit,
Okay.
short answers. What makes a great real estate leader?
A great real estate leader, I would say one thing is high energy, right? You've got to be somebody that doesn't need an alarm clock. You jump out of the bed. I think high energy. I would say passion. Like you got to really believe in stuff, and then I think you got to be a problem solver because, woo, you're gonna have human issues, project issues. Got to be a problem solver, and then I think somebody that's able to multitask. My days are so weird. Like, if any given day, if somebody said, "What were you doing today?" From saying I was walking through a dry retention pond to I was meeting with a politician to, I was reviewing numbers versus, I mean, like it is a very, very weird layup of things and not conventional, right? I think there are, Lewis, I'm sorry, this is fat, really, but I just want to say this. I think there's a lot of really bright people, high IQ people who fail in our industry that they just did not connect well to it because it functions differently than a lot of other industries.
One mistake investors make in uncertain markets.
One mistake investors make in uncertain markets would probably be not doing enough research and then not listening to their advisors, right? Again, there's certain tells that you can't get over, but I had a deal under contract in a really pristine area. Guy was from New York. He called an attorney friend of his, and the attorney said the property was terrible. They killed the deal, and the attorney was just wrong. It was like he just factually gave wrong information. He just was, and then the attorney went back off, and I sold the deal to somebody else, and they did phenomenally well with it. But man, you got to listen to the right advisors, not just somebody that's just talking to talk.
Best career advice you ever received.
Best career advice I ever received, I think, was like show up early, stay late, and be positive. Say yes. When you're early in your career, you need to do a lot of stuff that you maybe not like, but by doing the things you don't like, it gets you closer to doing the things that you love. So, I think every time there's a volunteer for something, say yes. And again, there's just nothing, showing up's undefeated, Annie Hunt's quote. You need to be there early, have a great attitude, have a can-do attitude, and then staying late. Doesn't mean crazy hours, but I mean, you can't beat positively and showing up. And I'll tell you this, man, like young energy that's able to just get a lot done is very meaningful.
One habit that has helped you succeed.
One habit that's helped me to succeed, I think, would probably be positive thinking. Like staying focused on things you can control. I have people, because I'm a public figure in that I have I'm not an elected official, but I'm a public official. I serve in some capacities. Some people reach out to me and say, "What's your opinion on this?" And they'll pick some high topic area, a subject that is nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my geography. And I'm like, I'm not getting into that, man. Like, I like staying on subjects I can personally impact. So if someone's like, racism in America is bad, I'm like, okay, well, I'm working on that one. Like, I'm working on that. Suicide's a problem. I'm working on that one. Other subjects come up, like, I don't know anything about that. Or I don't have any agency in that. And so I would tell people, keep your head space where you can control it. If you're thinking about your competitors all the time and following them, dude, what are you doing? Stop thinking about them. Focus on what you need to do to be the healthiest version of yourself, right? Like if you need to get up earlier and exercise, or you need to get healthier, or you need to do more cold calling, I don't know. but stop worrying about things you can't control and stay totally focused on the things you can make impact on. It's funny, Lewis, in my whole career, no one's ever stopped me from helping. Whenever I've done volunteer work and anywhere helping any marginalized person, no one has said stop doing that. I mean, if you truly want to make impact in the world, just do it. I always say people tell you they love something until you ask them to write a check, and then it turns out they like it, right? People who love things will sacrifice for them. If you're a parent, you love your kids, you'll go to some terrible dance recital and sit through it because you love the kid, right? That's what you do. Or you stay late at work to make sure you have money to send them to college, so you know what people love by what they choose to sacrifice for. And many people choose to sacrifice things that don't love them back or are not really helping them. So just make sure where you really invest your time and money in.
Last one, John. What does success mean to you today?
Success to me really feels about a couple things. One, it's about impact. I think that the most important word for me today, a lot of things don't mean that much to me anymore, but impact. Like, how are we moving the dial? How are we helping, like moving things forward? So impact is a big deal. And then the second word I really love is peace, like feeling a sense of peace. Sometimes when I feel agitated, I need to kind of listen to my soul, like what's causing agitation. And maybe I need to take care of myself. You always hear about in airplanes, you put the oxygen mask on you and then you help the child, because if you don't have the oxygen, you're going to die. So you gotta help yourself first. Sometimes life is putting the oxygen mask on yourself and checking yourself, what's going on here. And like, again, you go to the doctor, taking blood pressure and your temperature, and like, what's going on? Well, what's going on with me? What's my temperature, right? Like, I know something's wrong if on a subject I should be mad, but on a scale of 1 to 10, I should be at a 5 and I'm at a 9. It's not that the issue's not important, but that delta, that 4-point delta in my soul, it's probably some unresolved wounding from my childhood or something that I need to come back and work on. So I think that having a more sense of peace, and peace can be, um, hey, a friend of mine passed away and I'm sad because I missed them, and I'm grateful that I had them in my life. And even in the sadness, feeling peace. Or we went after this deal really hard, we didn't get it, but man, we went all in, I have a sense of peace. Or I lost an employee and I mean, they went to work for somebody else. That's so sad when something like that happens. It always bothers me. But you know what? They're making the right decision for their family, and I want to be a good person that I help. So feeling a sense of peace.
I think our viewpoint of success really evolves as
Oh yeah.
we continue to age. A little bit about me. I'm a personal trainer. I've been a
Cool.
personal trainer for 30 years, a
Wow.
health and fitness
Wow. That's
professional.
impressive.
Yeah. So I take care of myself and I've helped many, many clients in the past. But, back in the younger years, right, John? You wanted to bench and squat. I mean, you wanted to, it was so important for you to squat 500 pounds, right? I mean, if you're a strong guy,
Right.
or bench 500 pounds, right? I mean, as you age, I'm now 50, right? I turned 50 last year. Those days are over. Those days aren't even important anymore, right? Now it's about health and longevity. Now I don't care if I'm benching 120 or 125, right? It doesn't make a difference to me. It's not about that anymore. And it's funny how we evolve, right?
Oh,
It's
it's a
not
great
important
point.
anymore.
It's a great
Yeah.
point, Lewis.
Yeah.
You know, being a runner, I used to be able to do a lot of things with running, but in my 30s, I had a ton of back problems, and it took me forever to figure it out. And what I figured out was the solution's walking. And I
Yeah.
walk a ton, and
Sure.
I rarely have a back problem. But if I do have a back problem, I just walk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I do. I'm on the third floor of my office building. I do take the stairs every day, and so I try to do little
So
things like that.
very important.
But you are so right that as you get older, you got to kind of get over your ego and get over stuff
Yeah.
like that.
100%.
Listen, younger guys, younger women, when they feel like they have to be the boss and you can look at them, you're like, that person's a really good number two. They're not a number one, but they can't figure it out. They have all this pain. But when you get settled in the life of like, you know what? Like, again, like I can think on a board I'm sitting on, I'm really glad. And I don't want to be the chairman. I really cheer on the chairman. Like, they get the spotlight. And I'm so happy about that, right? So you're exactly right. I think that you do gain perspective, and when you're younger, you're gaining credibility. And so you need a degree and you need the promotion. And there are value in those things. But you do, I think you get older, you're like, oh, I will tell you the reverse though, is it's like men, men and women I know that are in their 70s and they don't let go. That's a very sad thing. It's a very sad thing to see people who are past their prime and like they got to get exited out. And I don't want you and I being those guys. I want you and I being healthy,
100%.
in charge, and we can help them in emergency. But boy, I don't want to be somebody that's past my prime and people are saying he needs to step down. I don't want that.
No, not at all. I actually train a younger lady. She's 79 today.
Wow,
And I've trained her for over 9, 10, 12 years now. I can't remember
that's
now,
cool.
but she tells, and she's faithful. She literally is in the gym 3 days a week, no matter
Wow,
what. She refuses to miss the part of her workout routine because it means so much to her. You have to have that endurance or that strength in order to do just daily things, right? So
that's
it
right.
means so much to her. So things change over the time, and you got to stay physically active, right?
For sure.
You got to have that activity, and walking is a fantastic way. I recommend to my clients, listen, 10,000 steps is a great benchmark, right? But if you want to push it, go to 20,000. Why not? Get 20,000 steps a day. You're really pushing it to the next level, and it's just going to help your longevity and your health and your lifespan even more so. But
For
I
sure.
appreciate it.
I agree.
Excellent. For anyone who is listening, who wants to follow your work or connect with you, where's the best place to find you online?
You can follow me on LinkedIn, join the team, follow me on LinkedIn. So easy find, John Crossman. I have two companies, Crossmark Services and Crossman Career Builders. I promise you, Google you want to be very easy to find me. So I have a website for both companies. But my two main things is commercial real estate in Florida. We do commercial real estate advisory work nationally, and then my other company, Crossman Career Builders, does some public speaking. I have a book, and we do some other kinds of consulting. And then we're always raising money to support college scholarships. So if you're looking for a place to make a donation, we'd be happy to point you to not to us, but to the colleges we donate to, encourage other people to do the same. And so we always want to be a fan and resource to the industry.
Absolutely love it. We'll drop all those in the show notes. John, this was a great conversation.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate how you frame leadership, resilience, and disciplined decision making in such a thoughtful way. For everyone listening, if you have value in this episode, share it with another commercial real estate operator, investor, or leader who is navigating today's market. John, thanks again for joining us on the AI Edge podcast. It's been a pleasure.
It's been an honor. Thank you, my friend.